I'm a woman.
I forgot that you're a woman. How could I? You're always yapping. What do you mean I don't treat you like a woman? I treat you like a woman. I let you sew, I let you cook, I let you wash the windows, I let you clean up.
Hollywood is full of stories, some told too soon, others buried for decades. But when Audrey Meadows finally decided to speak about Jackie Gleason, it sent quiet shockwaves through the industry. For years, she was known as the calm, collected woman who held her own opposite one of television's loudest and most unpredictable stars. As Alice Cramden on The Honeymooners *, Audrey was the steady voice of reason to Gleason's volcanic Ralph, the patient wife to his chaotic bluster. Their chemistry seemed perfect, almost too perfect. But behind those flawless performances lay something else entirely, something deeply unspoken. Audrey knew the truth, and for decades, she kept it to herself. In an era when women in entertainment were expected to smile and stay silent, speaking out could have cost her everything. And so, for a long time, Audrey chose to protect the myth, not just for Jackie, but for the millions of fans who still cherished The Honeymooners * as comedy gold. Privately, however, she carried a different version of the story. One she rarely shared, not with fans, not with the press, not even with colleagues. Then, at 73, she broke her silence. In a series of interviews and private letters, Audrey opened up in a way she never had before. It wasn't a dramatic tell-all or a bitter takedown, that wasn't her style, but it was honest. Quietly, powerfully honest. She described what it was really like working beside a man who demanded complete control, whose temper could turn a television set into a war zone, and who, despite his brilliance, left lasting emotional scars on those closest to him. Why had she stayed silent so long? What truly happened behind the scenes of one of TV's most beloved shows? And what did Audrey Meadows really think of the man America called the Great One? The answers began with what audiences never saw. To millions of Americans in the golden age of television, Audrey and Jackie were the perfect storm of opposites. She was grounded, witty, and restrained. He was fiery, impulsive, and loud. Together, they created sitcom magic that felt so raw and real, people assumed they were actually married. But the truth was far from warm. From the moment Audrey joined the cast, there were warning signs. Jackie Gleason was already a major star, and he wasn't known for collaboration. In fact, he initially rejected Audrey for the role, believing she looked too refined to play a working-class housewife. It was only after she had professional photos taken in a shabby housecoat, without makeup or hairstyling, that he reluctantly changed his mind. Even then, it was clear, this was his show, run on his terms. Jackie controlled everything, the writing, the directing, even the tone. No line was changed without his say-so. Cast members joked it was like working in a one-man kingdom, and only Jackie's voice mattered. Audrey was no pushover, but she understood the politics. She had to be funny, sharp, and quick, but never so strong that she outshined Jackie, and never so assertive that she questioned his authority. Still, the tension between them created an on-screen spark that audiences loved. Off-camera, however, the two were not close. In fact, they barely spoke unless it was about work. There were no dinners, no shared laughs after the cameras stopped rolling. Over time, the emotional strain began to take its toll. In a rare moment, Audrey once confided to a friend, "People think we had chemistry because we liked each other. It worked because we didn't." The illusion of harmony masked the real truth, a quiet tension that simmered just beneath the surface. As The Honeymooners * soared in popularity, maintaining that illusion became even harder. While viewers laughed at Ralph's dramatic rants and explosive gestures, the cast and crew behind the scenes were walking on eggshells. Jackie's temper was legendary, and not in a charming way. He didn't believe in rehearsals, so scenes were often shot in one take, no matter how messy. If someone missed a cue or flubbed a line, his reaction could be instant and brutal. Crew members later described the atmosphere as tense and unpredictable, saying everyone stiffened the moment Jackie entered the room. Audrey handled it all with grace, but she wasn't immune. There were days he wouldn't speak to her. Days when he criticized her performance in front of the cast, only to act like nothing happened the next day. It was emotional whiplash, manipulation wrapped in professionalism. Audrey, who valued structure and respect, often felt quietly drained. Privately, she admitted she was always walking a tightrope, one misstep away from disaster. And yet, she stayed. Not because she admired Jackie, but because she believed in the work. The Honeymooners * was something special, and she wasn't going to let his behavior overshadow her performance. There was no HR department, no counselor to turn to. Complaining meant risking her role. So she endured it all with quiet strength, hoping the payoff would be worth it. But even Audrey had her limits. Even the calmest woman in television had a breaking point. And when it came, her silence would no longer feel like loyalty, it would feel like self-betrayal. In real life, much like on screen, Audrey Meadows played the role of quiet strength, only off camera, the stakes were far higher. While her character Alice Cramden delivered sharp one-liners to Jackie Gleason's blustering Ralph, Audrey herself carried a burden few ever saw. Working with Gleason was emotionally draining, yet she never let it show. Not in interviews, not on red carpets, not even when reporters pushed for behind-the-scenes gossip. She kept the truth hidden behind her famously composed demeanor. Her silence wasn't just self-preservation, it was a decision to protect The Honeymooners*, a show that brought joy and laughter to working-class families. She feared that exposing the real dynamic might ruin the illusion that so many viewers cherished. But behind closed doors, the emotional toll was growing. Friends and family said Audrey often confided in them about the unpredictability of working with Jackie, the tension, the fear of missteps, and the loneliness of always pretending things were fine. There were moments when she thought about walking away, but quitting a national hit wasn't easy. CBS knew how vital she was to the show's success, reminding her that the chemistry she and Gleason shared was lightning in a bottle. Audrey's choice to stay silent wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She understood the landscape of the 1950s, where actresses who spoke out were labeled difficult and quietly pushed aside. So, she endured. She adapted. And she played her role, both on screen and off. Still, the scars remained. After The Honeymooners*, Audrey sought projects with more creative input and stability. But even decades later, those closest to her said she would sometimes fall quiet at the mere mention of Jackie's name, her expression tightening slightly as if recalling something she had spent years trying to forget. She stayed loyal to the show and its legacy, but at a personal cost. Eventually, she began to ask herself whether keeping those secrets had been worth it. What finally pushed Audrey Meadows to speak was not resentment, it was clarity. At 73, long after the applause had faded, she began to open up. There was no scandal-driven exposé or dramatic press tour. Instead, through late-in-life interviews, personal letters, and a memoir, she quietly told her truth. For the first time, she spoke candidly about Jackie Gleason, not just the genius performer, but the difficult man behind the scenes. She didn't aim to destroy his legacy, but she didn't sugarcoat the reality either. She described him as both brilliant and bullying. His talent lit up the screen, but off-camera, his volatility could leave emotional bruises. She recalled how Jackie's temper would erupt without warning, transforming the atmosphere on set into one of fear. Some days, he was warm and complimentary. The next, he might ignore her completely or lash out over something trivial. That emotional whiplash became a part of Audrey's routine. She had to brace for it, absorb it, and still deliver her performance with grace. It wasn't easy. In one rare interview, she admitted, he could be charming and generous one moment and unbearable the next. But still, she never indulged in bitterness. Her honesty was measured, rooted in experience, not vengeance. What made Audrey's revelations so powerful was their restraint. She knew how much people adored Jackie Gleason, and she didn't want to take that away from them. But she also knew the truth, that behind every iconic man in the spotlight, there's often someone quietly absorbing the damage. In her memoir, she wrote, "We made history, but it came at a price." For her, that price was emotional exhaustion, self-censorship, and years of pretending that everything was okay. But by finally telling her story, she gave herself and others permission to speak out too, without fear of judgment. Her words reshaped the public's view of The Honeymooners star. For the first time, fans saw that the show's magic wasn't born of friendship, but friction. That revelation complicated the nostalgia but also added depth. As she peeled back the layers, Audrey revealed a side of Jackie, and of herself, that few had ever seen. The legacy of The Honeymooners* is carved into the bedrock of American television. It's described as timeless, iconic, even perfect. But what fans never realized was that the show's brilliance came from something far more fragile than polished scripts or comedic timing. It came from real, unresolved tension. Audrey wasn't the only one affected by Jackie's behavior. Writers, stagehands, and producers also tiptoed around his moods. But as his on-screen wife, Audrey bore the brunt of it. She had to match his energy without overshadowing him, deliver clever lines without bruising his ego, and withstand his mood swings while remaining camera-ready. Her role required far more than acting, it demanded emotional endurance. In later years, Audrey would reflect on that dynamic with clarity and sorrow. She admitted their chemistry worked not because they liked each other, but because of the friction between them. Jackie's unpredictability kept her constantly alert, and her calm, measured delivery grounded his chaos. What fans saw as playful banter was, at times, a very real power struggle. She never denied his talent. In fact, she often praised him as one of the most naturally gifted performers she had ever worked with. But she also made it clear, his genius came at a cost. He could make her laugh in one scene, then berate her privately for a minor disagreement. That emotional volatility turned every day on set into a gamble. Ironically, it was this very tension that helped make the Honeymooners unforgettable. The raw energy, the slight edge in every exchange, the sense that anything could happen at any moment, it all contributed to the show's lasting impact. Their scenes didn't just entertain, they crackled with a realism that was sometimes uncomfortably close to the truth. As Audrey once put it, our performances worked because we were never close enough to be comfortable. It's a deceptively simple phrase, but one that reshapes how we view the Honeymooners entirely. What seemed like perfect casting was, in truth, a fragile balancing act between power and restraint, trust and self-protection. The show was lightning in a bottle, but someone had to hold that bottle steady, and for Audrey Meadows, that weight never truly lifted, even after the cameras stopped rolling. The emotional strain she carried privately would ultimately shape how she said goodbye, not only to Jackie Gleason, but to the defining chapter of her professional life. When Jackie Gleason passed away in 1987, tributes poured in from across the country. He was remembered as a trailblazer, a comedic genius whose influence helped shape television itself. But for Audrey, his death stirred something far more personal and far more complicated. She attended his funeral quietly and respectfully, offering no public statements, no headlines, just a silent farewell to the man who had once been both her scene partner and her source of deep emotional fatigue. In later conversations with close friends, Audrey admitted that saying goodbye brought her a strange, subtle peace. "I forgave him," she said, "but I never forgot." That single sentence captured everything she had withheld for decades. Forgiveness did not erase the pain, and memory did not rewrite the past, but with age came reflection rather than resentment. Professionally, she acknowledged that the Honeymooners gave her a lasting place in television history. It opened doors, secured her fame, and enshrined her in American pop culture. But personally, it left scars no level of success could heal. She once confided to a family member that the show had given her everything, except peace of mind. The tension followed her long after she left acting. In public, she spoke of Gleason with grace. She complimented his genius, shared light anecdotes, and upheld the image fans adored. But behind that poise was a woman who had spent a lifetime calculating every word, every gesture, every silence, aware that speaking out too soon, too loudly, would have shifted attention from her work to the dysfunction behind it. By the time Audrey began to speak more freely in her 70s, the cultural landscape had shifted. People were finally willing to listen to women who had stayed silent for too long. Her voice joined a growing chorus of performers and creators who had endured difficult working conditions in an industry that had long favored silence over truth. Was there redemption in her story? Perhaps. Audrey lived long enough to reclaim her voice and tell her truth on her own terms, to be remembered not just as Alice Cramden, but as a woman who endured, adapted, and outlasted one of television's most challenging dynamics. Was there regret? Maybe. But if there was, she never let it define her. Audrey had learned how to carry both pride and pain in the same breath, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy of quiet resilience. Audrey Meadows spent much of her career holding up someone else's legacy. She helped build it, protected it, and performed within it. And when she finally told her story, it wasn't to tear that legacy down, it was to reclaim her rightful place within it. What she revealed about Jackie Gleason wasn't meant to scandalize, it was meant to balance the record. For decades, only one story had been told. Now, finally, hers would be heard too. She showed the world that greatness on screen can come with hidden costs, that behind the laughs, the applause, and the ratings, there are bruises no one sees. Her truth wasn't about vengeance, it was about understanding. It was about letting the silence go. In the end, Audrey's decision to speak out was an act of quiet bravery. She didn't scream her truth, she whispered it. And in that whisper, she reminded us that even the strongest performers can be pushed too far. That dignity is not silence. And that truth, even when it arrives decades late, still matters. Jackie Gleason will always be remembered as the Great One. His talent was undeniable. But thanks to Audrey, We now remember that brilliance is not always kind, and that cruelty should never be the cost of genius. She showed us that the stories behind the screen matter too, that they evolve, deepen, and deserve to be told. As fans, it's easy to romanticize the golden age of television, to imagine it as a simpler, happier time. But as Audrey revealed, the truth is more complicated. The sets weren't always joyful. The partnerships weren't always equal. And the stars, no matter how beloved, often fought battles just out of frame. Audrey Meadows left behind more than iconic lines and timeless laughs. She left a lesson, that silence isn't always golden, that telling your truth is a form of liberation, and that sometimes the most powerful performance is the one that happens after the cameras stop rolling. In her 70s, with her voice steady and clear, Audrey Meadows delivered the closing chapter to a story millions thought they already knew. And in doing so, she finally took center stage, not as Alice, not as Jackie's foil, but as herself.